Thank you very much. So I've got a small presentation, not more than 5 minutes I will take for that. It sort of talks about his great work and a few moments which we could actually get across from a few friends and colleagues about the lighter moments that people have shared with him. So Professor Luciano Gattinoni was the president of ESICM between 1988 and 1990. A landmark work in ARDS. He made us understand a lot of concepts which we were not aware of, and really a thinker beyond the time that what he was working with. And you could see that the way he was thinking, he actually brought out a lot of concepts which have now been understood probably better, which he was thinking probably a few decades before. He was also the World Federation of Intensive and Critical Care president between 1997 and 2001. And these are some of the papers. So way back in 1986, he talked about low frequency positive pressure ventilation and ECOR in severe acute respiratory failure. That was way before we even thought about ECMO and ECOR as a concept. So really 1986 was a time when most of us in India were not even aware of an ECMO system. And even in the world, the ECMO was only used in a few places. He also talked about how the morphological response to positive end expiration, the expiratory pressure in acute respiratory system was impacting the lungs. And he did a CT scan study of that. And that basically then led him to talk about a possibility of a prone position ventilation, which would probably help patients survive. Though the trial was not a very overwhelmingly positive trial, but it sort of formed the basic structure on which the bigger Proseva trial ultimately got done in 2014 and published. So I think the work for such a big trial to happen in 2014 had started a few decades ago, where the concept of prone ventilation was essentially born. And then, of course, who could not remember the basic baby lung concept, which Professor introduced to the world, where we all know about how important that concept was for us to develop the protective lung strategy that we talk about today. So I think again, the seeds of this whole protective lung protocol, which we have now been implemented across the world and accepted across the world, were thought about way back, a couple of decades back, where actually the baby lung concept came into the picture. And again, he was way ahead of time, taking patients to CT scan, and he taught us about ARDS. He taught us about how the lung compartments were. He also taught us about how the recruitment could happen in these patients. And this is a classic slide which shows us the recruitment difference between the PEEP of 5 and a PEEP of 15 there. As I said, I'm not here to talk in details about the paper, just to talk about the work which is done. Ventilatory induced lung injury, again, a very important concept. He had a lot of work on that, and today we understand that it is so important to actually protect the further damage of our lungs by using a protective strategy. And then not so long ago, we've not forgotten the COVID-19. And again, his thoughts on COVID-19, whether it was pneumonia, whether it was ARDS or not, were really important for all of us to understand how we would ventilate these patients. And we would go across and go through the pandemic, ventilating hundreds and thousands of patients. Just a little lighter moment, some videos which I could collect, not more than a
By the mechanical ventilation. The RDS has been recognized because we have the mechanical ventilation, which keep this patient alive.
Well, I think the
So I think the word that ARDS is recognized because we have mechanical ventilation. If mechanical ventilation was not, they would not recognize ARDS. It's so true. I will stop sharing and I will hand over the proceedings to Dr. Shirik Prayag sir. Prayag sir, over to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. It's really a sad moment for all of us in the intensive care community, wherever they are in the world. It's something which we had never imagined would dawn on us so quickly. When you talk of Luciano, I think the intensive care world, anyone who is working in intensive care units as a consultant, as a trainee, uh, it's a very, very familiar name, primarily because of the enormous amount of work which you've just shown some glimpse. Over the last 30, 40 years, he's been one of the major names in the field of mechanical ventilation. We have probably known his antecedent career. That means he came out from Italy and worked in NIH in after graduating in anesthesiology in Italy. He moved to United States and worked for 3 years in NIH between 1975 and 77. And while he was doing that, he developed the concepts of developing the ECMO. But in 1977, he decided that he would like to go back to Italy and practice his critical care medicine in Italy. And so he came back to Italy, much like many others in that era, like Jalui and so many others. And he came back to Italy, developed the critical care systems, developed the units in Monza, worked for some time in Milano, uh, until his retirement. And after his retirement, he moved over to Germany. And there is a very interesting story about his move towards to Germany, and I'll share some of the anecdotes with you in a few minutes. So obviously, the intensive care world will remember him for his path-breaking contributions in understanding ARDS. If we want to understand ARDS, we need to understand pathophysiology. And the man who showed us the real pathophysiology was Luciano. He started with the CT scans. He started with the baby lung concepts, which led us, as Rahul said, to the limitations of tidal volume and safe ventilation. He thought of the prone position, and again, I'll tell you a lovely anecdote related to prone in some time. He thought of ECMO, he thought of ECOR. Recently, over the last few years, he was obsessed with the concept of power, trying to develop the equations related to power. And a few years ago, he came out with all the brilliant thoughts on the COVID lung and how to, what he thinks of COVID lung and how to ventilate and so on and so forth. And the number of papers in his name is more than 650. And as late as June of this year, he was continuing to publish despite his medical problems. And he published, the most recent ones included use of AI in trying to set the PEEP in patients of ARDS. So it's a fascinating concept which came out in June of this year. But friends, he was much more than all this, much, much more than all his scientific contribution. And that, to me, is the biggest attraction for me towards Luciano. He was a wonderful human being. He had enormous warmth. He could share humor with his close friends and make you laugh to no end. And above everything, he was a man of wisdom. So having seen the world, having seen the critical care world, having seen the patient suffering, and having seen the systems all across the globe, he was a man who came out with stunning statements which were full of wisdom. I think if I have to remember Luciano for one thing, I would remember him for his enormous wisdom, besides his enormous contributions in the field of ARDS. He had phenomenal interest in art. Anywhere that he went, he looked at the artistic components. So I remember way back in 2000, when he was in Calcutta, I roamed around with him looking at the art museums. He was interested in music, as Rahul showed you a glimpse. He had formed a group uh, with with mm, uh, which he used to practice music. It was a quartet, which was a musicians quartet. So he was phenomenally into it, and obviously his contribution to science was phenomenal. He was also interested massively in literature. So whenever I would talk to him about contributions to Indian literature by XYZ, he would open up his ears and listen very carefully and give me his enormous wise thoughts. So, what legacy does he leave behind? If I ask myself, what is the most significant thing that I will remember him? Obviously, the scientific contributions are far too many to not be remembered with, and his enormous contributions are ARDS are the basic background on which we will remember him. But beyond all this, his life was a symphony of enormous brilliance, extensive passion, and unwavering dedication to saving lives. I think to me, these were the most fascinating, his passion and his enormous dedication to saving lives. This is something that I will cherish him with. I'll tell you a small story. In 2001, when his study on prone ventilation came out, and it showed that while ventilating people in prone position for about 7 to 8 hours a day, the oxygenation improved, but not the survival. But a subgroup analysis showed that the survival amongst the very severe ones was also better. So we were using prone at that time through the some isolated papers which were coming. So I had started using prone in 1998 in Pune. We had had an interesting ISCCM meeting on that, and 2000, when his negative paper came out, when I met him, I said, Luciano, it didn't show benefit in survival. Luciano said, Shirish, I have told my ICU unit that if I am in this unit with a severe ARDS, do not ventilate me in supine position. Keep me in prone all the time. So much do I believe in the concept of prone. So I went on to discuss what made him so convinced about the utility of prone, and then why is it that it didn't get translated into evidence through the study which he had published. He said, probably we didn't try it for too long. We used it only for 7 hours of the day, primarily because the staff who could run it was available only for an 8 hour shift. So I could use it only for 7 hours of the day. So my suggestion would be that if you use it for extended periods, I'm sure the trial would come positive. And Proseva in 2013 proved that. Today we use prone as a standard torchbearer of oxygenation for severely hypoxic patients in ARDS. And I think all those patients who have survived because of the appropriate use of prone position will stand as a legacy and will stand as testimonies to his intelligence, to his unwavering dedication, and to his brilliance all the while. Beyond that, he was a phenomenal human being, full of warmth, humanness, interest in arts. And he had mentioned to me once that the German Chancellor, Helmut Kohl, who was in charge of Germany for a very long period of time, his son developed, he had a road traffic accident in Italy way back in 1991. And he was transferred to Luciano's unit. And after a couple of months of intense struggle, he came out, survived, and went back home. At that time, Chancellor Kohl mentioned that this was one human being who was full of not only just extreme professionalism, but extreme humanness and very warm interactions with the patients and their relatives. And as a testimony to that, he was given the German citizenship in 1991. And as a result of that, after he retired from Monza, he decided that he would take over the position at Göttingen for where he was working for the last 10, 12 years after his retirement. So a great human being and a phenomenal researcher and a very intelligent man. And above everything, a man who would leave things behind to be cherished all the time in the intensive care unit. So Luciano, as they would say in Italian, arrivederci, which means goodbye, my friend. We will remember you forever in the intensive care world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Indeed, a larger than life personality, a great teacher, a great researcher, a great doctor. We've got Dr. Grasalis, who is from Italy. I would like him to speak a few words about Professor Luciano, and then we could have Dr. Rhodes and Dr. Tabul in that order. So, Professor Grasalis.
Yes, thanks, Raul. I just want to say a couple of very few words about Luciano. I didn't have the chance to work directly with him, but I have the honor of sitting on his chair now, because, as you know, his position was taken by Antonio Pesenti, and then again, I have the honor of having this place and this position, and I think that the legacy of Luciano is not only his academic and scientific production, it's mostly in his dedication to science, knowledge, research. He kept wanting to find out the mechanisms behind things, and this is what we should have we have learned from him. He was a genius, and I think that what we are now, we are indebted to him for what we are now, and everyone here and every intensivist in the world should be grateful to Luciano for what he taught us, and we will never forget him. So thanks for the opportunity, and we will remember him many times during this year and in the future.
Thank you very much. Also, the concept of mechanical power, I should have put that paper as well. I just remembered. Actually, Arindam WhatsApped me just now and said that we need to talk about mechanical power as well. So, Dr. Rhodes, over to you, Professor Rhodes.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Shirish. Thank you, everyone. It is indeed a sad day, isn't it? But there's also a bit of joy to get 71 people together celebrating someone's life, and it's so quickly. And that says something about the man himself. I think he was a true genius, as Giacomo said. But he's more than a genius. He was he had one of the most profound intellects I've ever seen. Definitely in intensive care. He was one of the true giants, I think, of our specialty. We talk about power, we talk about ARDS, but on a whole series of other measures, he was clearly influential, pivotal, and drove thinking and thoughts and how we practice medicine today. I had the privilege of knowing him as a past president of the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine when I was president. He was one of the more senior presidents, and his mentorship, his support, his advice, he always found time to talk to you. But that wasn't just because I was president. He always found time to talk to even the most junior of people anywhere. He always found time for you. And it's that, I think Shirif mentioned it was that humanity that he had. He always had a smile on his face. He always was slightly laughing. He always had that kind of cheeky glint in his eye. That's how I remember him. It's the ability to stand on a podium and communicate complex things in a way that even I think I could understand. And I used to come away inspired by his talks and then forget it all about 3 hours later because it was too complex for me to remember. But he was able to distill those complexities into simplicities. with a bit of humour and a little cheeky glint, and then come off the podium and go on to, as you described, go onto a piano and start singing it. What a man! What a life! I'm in awe of him. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm sure we'll fondly remember him for a long time.
Thank you very much for sharing your memories and thoughts on Professor Luciano. We've got Professor John Louis Tobeel. If he could join, I can see him. Professor Tobeel.
Yeah, thank you. So I fully share what all the other said about Luciano. Of course, his passion. He was a genius. Of course, I know him for 37, 38 years now. And when he was the president of the SICM, by the way. And I have just two things to say more. First, he also liked hemodynamics, not only ARDS, but he was a fan of hemodynamics, and in particular, the CO2 metabolism. And we had a lot of great discussion about PC2 gap, for example. And every time I learned a lot from these discussions. The second point I would like to say, I was with him 2 weeks ago. In fact, I was invited in a Polish Congress in Poznan, Poland. He was also invited, but he delivered his talk online about acute lung injury and the ventilator-induced lung injury and the new insights. So he was there on the screen only 2 weeks ago, in the end of November. So it was good. He gave a very, very nice talk about the future. So to be honest, I was shocked when I learned that he died some days ago, because he was delivering the talk online. And so this is what I would like to say. That thank you thanks to the Indian Society of Critical Care Medicine for this for organizing this tribute to the person of Luciano. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Tobeel. We've got Professor Antonio join. Professor Antonio, if you could share your thoughts about Professor Luciano. Thank you. Professor Antonio, yeah, thank you.
Good morning. I don't have much to add, except that I grew up with Luciano, and I met him when I was a student and he was a young doctor. He has always been the same way, that is open, generous, dedicated to research, and he had an extreme curiosity to understand the mechanism of disease. He was always putting the pathophysiology first. Pathophysiology first. If you cannot understand the mechanism, you cannot cure. And obviously, he brought to Italy ideas from US. I would say, he was the first internationally known Italian critical care physician. And he brought a lot of information, new things to Italy. He was the motto of the intensive care development in Italy, and not only in Italy, I must say. So I was in Poland too with Jean-Louis 2 weeks ago. Obviously, I was frequently in phone contact with Luciano, because when he retired, he moved from Milan to Germany. And really, he was dedicated to research and to communicating the results of research till the real end. He was a curious man. He used to say that luck and merit as are two rings of the same chain. And indeed, he has been. He wrote a paper on anesthesiology about curiosity, luck. I don't remember exactly the title. A couple of years ago, but he was describing that he was lucky. He had good chances, but sure, he profited from the occasion and he could recognize the good part of any event in research and also in life. That's what I can say about him.
Thank you, Professor Antonio. Thank you very much. I'll have.
Thank you.
I'll have. Thank you for all of you. Thank you for the kind words. I'll have the president of IICCM, Professor Pradeep Kumar Bhattacharya, to say a few words about Professor Luciano. Pradeep bhai, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Rahul. I think we are from the next generation. Actually, when he started giving concepts about ARDS, we were just in the learning phase. We are students. And now when we find that with the unfortunate passing of Professor Gattinoni, and he was a true giant in the field of intensive care medicine. He was born in Milan and started with the University of Milan. Everything, his path led him from the University of Milan to the forefront of critical care innovation. Basically, the kind of things which he has given. I heard and met him many times, but although I was not in the form of a personal friendship with him, but as a student, I always feel as a student of him, the way he used to express and tell everything. And most of the things has been told here. And what I understand that he was one of those who used to think and practice science out of the box. His thinking, the way he used to think was completely different. And whenever I used to hear his lectures, I used to think that this man is great. How he comes with such kind of concepts. And I think these are the way where we are going to get in future the things as far as the ARDS and other respiratory mechanics, the kind of thought which he used to express and present during his presentations. Even though we are saddened by his passing, but we rejoice in the enduring impact of his work. And in order to ensure that Professor Gattinoni's pursuit of excellence in critical care continues to live on, his legacy will continue and inspire these future generations of clinicians and researchers. I think his absence will be deeply felt by all of us. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Bhattacharya. Indeed, the legacy continues. We've got Professor Sheila Maitra, who is the immediate past president of IICCM. So the first lady to speak for the evening as well. So Sheila, please, over to you.
First of all, thank you very much, Dr. Rahul Pandit and Dr. Shirish Prayag, for arranging this. It's really very nice gesture. A lot has already been said about Prof. Luciano Gattinoni. I don't want to repeat it because it's already been described. But to me, he was a genius. I just want to, give you a little anecdote about the first time that I saw Prof. Luciano Gattinoni. And this was a talk in one of the European meetings. And at that time, I was very young and I didn't know that he was such a big guy. And I remember listening to that talk and I was so, totally fascinated, mesmerized. And he was explaining this concepts, physiological concepts. And I was really awestruck. And I remember going up to him at the end of the talk and, asking him some questions because I didn't get an opportunity to do it during the talk. And, he took time aside. He was so humble, so simple. And, he explained what I didn't understand. And then one of my colleagues said, you know who that is? That is Prof. Luciano Gattinoni. Do you know who he is? And that was my first experience, knowing about him. And then I saw another side to him. And that was at the World Congress in Sydney and also in Korea, where I saw him playing the piano. And I saw a little different side of him, so creative, so passionate about music and, talking about wine. And, this was a different aspect to his personality that was so fascinating. If I had one adjective to describe him, I would say a really, really passionate man, passionate in all aspects, because he was so passionate about promoting science, promoting his ideas and concepts. I think till the very end, he was, trying to do this. And I think that's something that's really commendable. Of course, we knew he was unwell. We knew that the end is nigh. But when it actually happens, we all feel very sad. We will definitely miss his presence, but his legacy and his contribution to science will continue to inspire all of us. Rest in peace, Professor Luciano Gattinoni.
Thank you, Sheila. I'll have Dr. Srinivas Samvedan and then Dr. Praveen Amin and Yatin Mehta in that order to sort of speak. Srinivas is the president-elect for IICCM. Srinivas, over to you.
Good evening, Rahul. Good evening, Prag sir. Thank you very much for facilitating this condolence meeting for the great Professor Luciano Gattinoni. My lasting impression of Professor Luciano was from the 10th mechanical ventilation workshop in Pune, which I attended as a delegate. And in those days, we were all reading the publications coming from his group, and we approached him for clarification on a few issues. The passion and the enthusiasm with which, at his level of seniority and accomplishment, the way he spoke to us and explained to us has left a lasting impression on me in those days. But I think the life, the work, and the contribution of Professor Gattinoni represents the fact that the adaptation of simple physiological principles and concepts can go a long way in understanding complex critical care problems, and his work is the seminal example of that. Yes, physically, Professor Gattinoni is no longer with us, but every day, we set a ventilator with low tidal volumes and we try to optimize the PEEP and we prone patients. It is probably likely that Professor Gattinoni is watching us. So I think he is there, even though physically he's not in our midst. May his soul rest in peace. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Very well said, Jai Srinivas. He's indeed watching us, and he must be watching this meeting as well going on right now, and he must be smiling that what's been talked about and the music that he used to play. So, Praveen sir, over to you, Amin sir.
Thank you, Rahul. Thank you, Shirish, for organizing this condolence meeting. My first experience with Luciano was in the early 90s when I was working with David Bahari. And David said, meet Luciano Gattinoni. He's the guy who knows everything about the lung. He knows everything about ventilating the lung, and he knows more about ventilating ARDS patients. So that was my first exposure of Luciano Gattinoni in the early 90s when I was at the Guy's. Subsequently, like what Sheila said, at the World Congress, where he was the president, and the opening ceremony that was the 8th World Congress, which was held in Sydney. He didn't give a opening lecture or welcome lecture. His welcome lecture was on the piano in the stage, and he sang a melodious song, which was really appreciated by everybody because there were no boring lectures. It was extremely melodious song, and he was completely in his own when he was singing. So that was a great experience that we saw about him. And now beyond all this, there is an unparalleled achievement Luciano has had, and he has been a mentor, collaborator, and has been inspiration for so many people. His wisdom, of course, and his humility, most of all his humility. He was a very compassionate man, and it resonated in his academic circles. And he touched many lives, and we all who know him all of us who had the privilege of knowing him, we really enjoyed his company when he used to come into conferences in India, and we really enjoyed his knowledge of wine was also terrific. Today, as we mourn this immense loss, we also celebrate his legacy, which will continue to guide the generations to come of how our thoughts about ventilating patients in ARDS. With this, I'd like to say that our thoughts are with his family members, his friends, and his colleagues during this very difficult time. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Amin sir. Yatin Mehta sir, we would like to hear from you about Professor Luciano. You are on mute, sir. I think he's logged off. By the time he logs in, Dr. Jirpe, or we've got the Mumbai branch chairman, Dr. Sonali Vadi, and Pune branch chairman, Dr. Khalid. If any one of you would like to speak a few words, please.
Thanks. I echo Sheila because everyone spoke so large about Professor Gattinoni, and no need to repeat those things. In 2004 in Barcelona, I still remember first time I was attending the European Critical Care Congress, and when I entered into the hall, it was full pack. Somehow we find a place there, and it was not very fluent English, but there was a pin drop silence. So I was wondering who is speaking. There was a Professor Gattinoni. He was speaking in his Italian English, and then we tried to listen. Everybody was trying to listen each and every word he was speaking, and that's what the Professor Gattinoni. That means the simplicity, originality, original work, physiology, and explain the complicated ARDS or complicated ARDS physiology into the simplicity. I think that's what I first learned, that you have to have original work and the simplicity rather than those fancy slides or the fluent English or anything else you don't need in any science. You need the very original work and believe on yourself. That is the first thing we should remember about the Professor Gattinoni. Second thing I learned during the 2015 annual Congress of the Critical Care, Indian Society of Critical Care in Jaipur. I was a co-faculty with him for the COPD ventilation. I thought he is a very senior professor. He will just have the few minutes physical presence. He will give some tips. And then I have to conduct the entire work. So I was prepared according to that. Professor Gattinoni sharp arrived at 8:30. And he said that I am going to conduct the all 5 rotations. And he physically present during the all 5 rotations for 2.5 hours. And that taught me that we need to the sincerity and honesty to your work, whatever the responsibility, whether it is a workshop or whether it is a workstation or the lecture, you need to deliver your best. And I still remember we were all listening, though I was a co-faculty, I was just listening to him entire COPD workstation during those 5 rotation. And that is what makes him great. And that is why we are together and speaking spontaneously from the bottom of our heart without preparing anything, just whatever we would like to express, we are expressing. So I will not say goodbye. I will say that we will remember him through his original work, and we'll try to touch the many more life through his work and his research. Thank you.
We've got Dr. Yatin Mehta joined back. Mehta sir. Oh, he just logged off again. All right, we've got a few more minutes. I thought that we could sort of continue for another 10 minutes or so. If anybody in the who's joined in wishes to speak a few words, please, the house is open. Feel free. You can just put on your mic on and you can speak up.
So just a few
Yes, Sonali,
words.
thanks. So
Thank you.
Sonali Badi is the chairperson of the Mumbai branch of ICC. And thanks, Sonali. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Rahul. So critical care fraternity is deeply indebted to Professor Luciano Gattinoni for his contribution to the field of critical care medicine. Deepest condolences to the family. May his soul rest in peace. Om Shanti. Thank you.
Mehta sir, I can see you again. Can you...
Sorry, Rahul. I think thank you, Dr. Pandit and Dr. Prayag for organizing this. I think I met Dr. Gattinoni several times. Last year, can you hear me, Rahul?
Yes, sir. We can hear you well, sir.
Last year at the SWA Kelso meeting in Kuwait, he had a talk on ECOR. I think he done quite a lot of work on that. And I had a pro and con session on the same after his talk. So I was feeling so sheepish doing it while he was sitting in the audience. He was a wonderful man as a human being, and as a scientist, his contribution is irreplaceable. Wonderful person to interact with, down to earth, very grounded. And I would only say they don't make like him anymore. So may his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta. I have Dr. Rajan Barorkar who wants to speak a few words. Rajan, over to you.
Thank you, Rahul, for this opportunity. Well, we received the link in the afternoon. The Nagpur branch of Indian Society of Critical Care Medicine extending their heartfelt condolences in the demise of Professor Gattinoni. Well, I have a very scant memory sharing time with Professor Gattinoni during Kolkata conference long back. That was in 2001, 2002, when he had come over there for a lecture. And I remember him sitting on the stairs of the convention center and actually discussing it with us. We were just students. We were just freshly entered into a critical care practice. But that humbleness, that humility, and subsequently his research that has changed the management of ARDS all through the world. Dr. Prayag has rightly said that is when we started proning the patients and we were actually getting results. So thank you so much, Professor, and we'll always remember you in our work, in our culture, and whenever we practice a critical care medicine. Thank you so much, and may his soul rest in peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Barorkar. We've got Dr. Rahul Kashyap who wants to speak a few words as well. Rahul.
Thank you, Professor Pandit. I just want to share that I never got a chance to meet him in person, but I got a chance to listen to him through several of Society of Critical Care Medicine meetings in the United States. His work has influenced our work. Me and my professor, we did a lot of research in ARDS for 16 years at Mayo Clinic, and I was amazed to read his papers, listen to his talks. So it's definitely a great loss. And then through now what others faculty members sharing here today, Dr. Maitra and others, I'm learning his passion for piano as well as his knowledge for wine and so on and so forth. Great personality. I've heard great things about him, and I'm first-hand experience of consuming his literature, his research work as well. So I owe my career to his work through my mentor, Professor Gaich at Mayo Clinic. And I'm amazed that he has so many fans around the world, and then definitely will carry on his legacy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Kashyap. If anybody wishes to speak, please, we have a few more minutes, a couple of minutes more, and then I would request Prayag sir to just say a few words at the end, and we could wrap up the condolence meeting. Anybody else who wants to speak? So larger than life personality, great researcher, passionate man, a very kind human being, and I would say a person who was basically way ahead of his time. This is what I'm hearing, and indeed it's going to be a big loss for critical care. But as everybody said, the legacy lives on. Every time, as Srinivas said, we set up a ventilator, we prone a person in the ICU, we will remember Professor Luciano Gattinoni, and I'm sure he'll be watching all of us. Prayag sir, for the closing remarks from you. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Rahul. And thank you, everyone, especially our friends from Europe, all the friends from across the country. every one of us is mourning the loss of Gattinoni. It's unbelievable to think that Luciano is no more with us. We knew that he was unwell, but he was publishing, and as Antonio said, he was also participating in the meetings. So it was thought that, like everything else, he would beat the disease as well. Anyway, life will go on. However, we will continuously remember Luciano through his contribution, as Rahul had said. And every time I see a patient who has survived because he was put in prone position. I have a young boy who was put in prone position for his severe ARDS way back in 2002 after the publication of Luciano's negative paper. We had put him in prone and he survived, and he grew up, completed his education, got married, has his family, has got a job. Every time I meet him, I silently say a prayer to thank Luciano for the immense contribution that he has made to all our lives. So we will remember him and we'll carry on his legacy of being humane, humble, and making sure that science will win and science will pervade everything that we do in our endeavors to make sure that critical care really turns into a profession of saving lives. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening and paying our humble tributes to this great genius. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for joining. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prayag sir. Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.